Hey guys, TonyRo here, recording another Lee Chess Classical game up against Intelligent Wisdom. We have an Alekhine's defense, slopping it up. I'm going to go d6, as is usual. He'll probably exchange, I'm guessing. Yes. h3. I don't know. He wants to play knight f3, obviously. Whoops. But he doesn't want bishop g4. That's fine. The exchange variation is very popular against the Alekhine's defense. Bishop d3. I think in part because it's easy to reach as white, so you don't have to worry about a lot of move order issues for black. It's just you play e5. You can even play c4 first, and you can get your stuff. People like that. People like getting their stuff. So d5, c5, knight c4 is pretty principled. Does anything make more sense? e5 is a little bit tempting in this position, and I think it's partially because his pieces are situated on these squares. If I go e5 and he goes d5, I can go knight e7, and then after f5 there are a lot of irritating pawn pushes. But d5 is the more usual way to play the Alekhine. And then after c5, I think I can maybe exploit the fact that white hasn't played the typical b3 yet by meeting c5 with knight c4. I'm just trying to decide if there's anything better. You know what? For time management's sake, I'm just gonna go for it. Let me, as usual, close Facebook, close YouTube. That doesn't make noise, but it's just close Peter's Fiddler's series on the Grunfeld, which I'm using to study some theory for a correspondence game. Someone played 3f3 against me in the Grunfeld. Truth be told, it's one of the lines I haven't studied much yet. I know you're supposed to go d5 anyway, and ooh, wow, interesting. I didn't expect that. So I'm going to take back. I don't mind this position for black at all. Now what do I do? I can take here and try and play against the c-pawn. I don't think I have to do that yet. The only irritation is that I would really like to go like bishop f5, and I can't do it because the bishop is on d3. I'm trying to think of, is there something wrong with him putting his bishop on d3? I mean, one thing I noticed right away is that e5 probably at least equalizes instantly. If I go e5, I mean, I'm just essentially liquidating all of the pawns in the center, and I don't think white has anything truly exciting there. For instance, e5, d takes e5, knight takes e5, you know, we take all this stuff. He can take on d5, I'll take here, and yeah, I mean, I think that's about equal. Is there anything more interesting? f5, planning to go f4? Probably not. Probably bishop c4 is irritating in that case, exploiting the spin. It just looks stupid anyway, but, you know, worth thinking about, I guess. Yeah, I mean, another thematic plan would be knight takes c3, b takes c3, and bishop e6. Planning on going something like rook c8 and knight a5, and pressuring this c-pawn down the open file, and also trying to capitalize on this weak c4 square. Because he plays b takes c3, he can no longer really guard the c4 square, so it would be very common to play moves like this and try to get in here. Knight e3, fe3 looks okay. I don't necessarily think that's the right way to go. Knight b4, I'm guessing he's just going to go back to b1, and I don't see any reason why I'd be happy that I did that. Another idea is to just go b6 and bishop b7. That's also a fairly natural way to fix my development. Now that I look at it, I kind of like that. And another idea is maybe to go b6, and let's say he just plays like a null move. Maybe I can go... yeah, I'm thinking maybe I can go knight b4 then, and if bishop b1, maybe bishop a6 is irritating. Anywho, I'm just going to play this move. And I'm going to pre-move this because it's the only legal capture. If he goes rook c1, I'm going to play bishop b7 without thinking about it. I think black's position is very comfortable here. I just have a very typical isolated pawn position. I don't see why I should be at all worse. I've had good results with Alekhine's defense. I feel like it leads to positions that are conducive to my style. Okay, so he fears the knight coming to b4. That's fine with me. I'm just going to go bishop b7. Knight takes c3 here is starting to look enticing. I'm guessing now if I do it, he's going to take with the rook. Typical moves would be queen d6, maybe queen d7, rook c8, knight e3, knight takes c3. I can think about all of these moves. I'm just going to... Rook c8 is the most natural, I think. It's the least committal. I don't know if my queen belongs on d6 or d7, but I'm pretty sure my rook belongs on c8. Also, if white is going to take on d5 at some point, then queen d6 and queen d7 would lose a tempo to knight takes d5, so... Queen d2 makes some sense. At some point, I'm wondering if knight e3, fe3, e5 is just going to be good for black. That's sort of a thematic idea. It happens in the opposite positions. This is kind of like a reverse Tarrasch now that I think about it. I'm sort of playing the white side of a double fianchetto Tarrasch, I think, pretty much. And a lot of times in the Tarrasch, white plays knight takes... Well, I'll show it after the game. It would be extremely confusing for me to say the notation now. So white plays knight take d4, takes e6, takes the light square bishop on e6, and then strikes back against those pawns with e5. And here, that's starting to look enticing. If knight e3, fe3, e5, d5, knight e7, maybe not. Knight e3. It looks like it should be the way, but I'm not sure I see something. Knight e3, fe3, e5, d5. Can I go e4 there? Probably not. I don't think so. e5, d5. Knight a5 threatens knight b3, winning an exchange. And I'm hitting the d pawn. And perhaps even there, I'm just threatening to play something like knight c4. Okay, I like that, actually. I like that a lot. So we're going to do this. Taking with the queen just hangs the pawn, so he can't do that. And the point is generally that d takes e5, knight takes e5, and bishop takes. I have the two bishops. He has this isolated pawn on e3. I would be very much better there. So the key thing here is that white does not have time for e4. If white had time for e4, this idea would not be particularly great. The e5 pawn would hamper this bishop, and his d5 pawn would hamper this bishop, but as is the case, I have just enough time to find some counterplay, it looks like. I'm just threatening to take here, and I'm also threatening this. You can go bishop c2 and stop both. But then maybe I'm just getting in with knight c4 and bishop h6, ganging up on this dude. At some point, it might be worth considering me... I might have, like, tactical ideas with e4. Like bishop c2, I wonder even if e4 is possible. e4 hitting the knight. If he takes with the bishop, then I get to hop back into b3, and if he takes with the knight, then d5 is hanging. So But I think bishop c2, knight c4, for instance, is good enough as is. Also good is, you know, this d6 square is a juicy blockading square for my knight. Always good to put knights in front of passed pawns if you guys are just getting into middle game strategy. And b2 is hanging. And I have this possible threat, deflecting the pawn away from protecting this knight. So it's starting to maybe look a little dire for white. More serious than I thought. Maybe d5 is not the best. I don't know. Maybe bishop c2 is inaccurate. Or maybe I'm overestimating my position. That's wholly possible as well. So black's whipping up some counterplay, that is for sure. I want to rip open the game for my two bishops somehow, just make them extremely active. That's why I'm thinking about something like e4, get this guy working. Hopefully I can win d5, even if it's just a trade, and get this guy working. God, I'm terrified that one day I'm going to like accidentally click on a piece. Like I almost played g5 there by accident, just by clicking on that piece. So I think bishop d5 is premature on account of a rook coming to the... but is it? Bishop d5, then I can rook d1, bishop f3, rook takes d8, bishop takes e2. That's probably fine for black. The question is whether or not I want to allow bishop takes d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5. Maybe bishop b3 there is irritating. I mean, one idea is to just take on a3 or take on b2. Probably taking on a3 is better. You know, taking on a3 has its merits as well. But I can also go bishop h6, and that's what I'm looking at now. Bishop h6, what does he do? It's not actually that easy to find a move. And if I get to take on e3 with any of my pieces, it's going to be absolute disaster for white. What does he have? Knight d1? Knight d1's pretty gross. I mean, I can just take on d5 at that point. Jeez. All right, don't psych yourself out, Tony. Don't play like a crazy person. Just play it. It seems good. My mom right now, if she were here, she would tell me not to crack my knuckles. But you know what, Pam? You're not here. Hope everyone's having a good week. I know it's been a while since I recorded a video. I apologize for that. Been busy lately with work and moderately lazy as well. Not gonna lie. But I have some stuff coming. I got some stuff coming. Some stuff is in the pipeline. Shout out to my one spectator, Boss Potato, a fellow Lee Chess admin and classical enthusiast. I just cooked myself a fairly mediocre steak. Wow. Just giving it up. Actually, that's not a bad move. Now that I look at it, he probably is losing the exchange anyway, I'm guessing, and this is the best way to lose it. Is it worth flicking in the check? Probably not. I think I'll probably want that check for later, I'm guessing. Can I take on b2? That's pretty greedy. I'm worried about my knight getting trapped. Like, knight takes b2, bishop b3. Seems like it traps my knight. So I'm going to give up on that fairly quickly. Queen d6, knight b5 is probably a little bit annoying. Maybe I should probably just go f6 and get ready to protect this pawn for when he kicks my knight away from this beautiful c4 square. Its time on this square, I fear, is short-lived. Bishop b3, for instance, just gives me the boot immediately. One idea is rook f7 to c7. I like the look of that. If you guys saw the last game where I put a rook on f7, maybe I should reconsider, because last time it didn't go that great. But This time I feel like it's better. I'm going to be relatively happy with my position after knight d6. I mean, bishop b3, knight d6. I'll probably play rook f7 to c7, and this bishop sucks. I mean, yeah, that's for sure, but maybe at some point if white's queen exits this diagonal, I can pop back in. Peek around the corner, as my first coach ever said, and reactivate this bishop. So that's a plan. Yeah, all right. I'm not going to think for very long. I'm just going to play this move. Knight b5, impossible because of this. Even if he moves the rook, let's say with rook f1, knight b5, trying to shake this knight from d6 is still probably not advisable because of this pin. So one idea for me is to go like something like rook c5 and queen c8 and then bishop a6. Rook c5 also just grabs control of the b4 square and maybe gets ready to treble on the c file. So he's bouncing. Plays rook d1. So it's almost like he wants to play this move. But rook c3 isn't anything. I think I'm just going to play rook c5. I don't see anything else that's super exciting. If he plays knight a4, I'll just go back. And if he plays knight c3, I'll just play something else. I'll play rook f7 or queen d7, something normal. Maybe even this rook to c7, looking to go queen c8 and bishop a6, like I mentioned before. Just trying to play a little bit quickly. If he moves this queen away from this pawn, I will be very hard-pressed to avoid rook takes c3, b takes c3, knight takes e4. Just because I love sacking the exchange. Actually, it's probably not good. He might have d6 check at some point, and I don't want to let him activate this d-pawn, so... Maybe at some point it's worth shoring up my king with king g7, just not allowing a queen to come into h6 and getting off this diagonal. Probably protecting the weak f6 pawn. This move is probably a good idea, even though it doesn't look like the most incisive move in the world. It looks kind of lazy. This is the kind of move you see in a game where you're like, really, king g7? But it's a good practical idea and just a small improvement type situation. We might get to the point in this game where the pace slows a little bit and I have time for stuff like king g7. Worth thinking about. But right now, moves like rook f7 and queen c8 are on my mind. Yeah. I figured. So I'm going to go rook c7. And maybe I'll go queen d7 and rook fc8, or maybe I'll go queen c8. I'm not decided yet. Queen c8 is looking kind of nice. There's a interesting... Yeah, so he's going back. You dirty rascal. Queen d7, bishop a4 is irritating. Is it not? Queen c8, knight b5 anyway is kind of annoying. Point being that bishop a6, knight d6 is possible. That's probably still fine for black, I just don't want to allow it. Maybe queen d7, bishop a4, queen c8. The point being that his bishop on a4 is no longer on this diagonal. And then if knight b5, maybe taking is not as bad then. I could also just play king g7, knight b5. Ah, if my queen isn't on c8, my knight b5 doesn't work yet. So I think I'm actually going to go king g7. It's pretty clear he wants to, at least to me, it seems like he wants to play knight b5 and try and unlock this d-pawn, get rid of this knight, which is a good idea. There are just some, I think, logistical problems with going there right away because of bishop a6, as far as I can tell. What was I talking about? Oh, in the book Grandmaster Preparation Positional Play, there's sort of a central... he gives a central tenet guidelines of positional play, and I think it's asking yourself 3 questions, and the first one is like, where are the pawn breaks? Which of course helps a lot. There's where are the pawn breaks can tell you not only where the pawn breaks are and where you should be sort of aiming to play, on which sector of the board you should be aiming to play based on the pawn structure, but also where your pieces should go. So, you know, if you know where your pawn break is, that also influences where your pieces should go in order to support and amplify that pawn break and be well placed after that pawn break. But there's also what's the opponent's idea? So sort of prophylaxis. How do you stop your opponent's idea? And the last one, which is the one I'm reminded of here, is what's your worst place piece, or what's your worst piece, and how can you improve that piece? And I think about this bishop on b7 and this rook on f8. For white, you could argue that you know, even this knight f3, because these squares are not all particularly great, that maybe this knight is not on its best place square at the moment. So he goes knight b5 in the face of bishop a6. Well, I'm going to play this because my bishop, as I said, is doing nothing. Oh, man, I played it too quick. This might not actually be that bad for me. I'm just irritated at myself. All right, so let me slow down for a hot second. You dummy. Maybe just king g8. Knight takes d8. Bishop takes d1. Bishop takes d1. Rook takes d8. I'm still all right. So I didn't blunder. But I could have because I didn't see it. I got so caught up talking positional play that I missed a simple Zwischenzug, or in-between move, for those of you who don't speak German. I also don't speak German. I'm not going to lie. I just know the chess words. I think Germans also call knights Springer, which is sweet. I wish we had cool names for our pieces. I think bishop is Läufer. So when you see German notation, knight is S and bishop is L. I forget, though. Now I'm trying to remember what they are in Italian. I think knight is Cavallo. Bishop is Alfiere. Queen is Regina. I can't remember the rest. What is rook? I don't remember. It's really not important. I'm just babbling. It sort of feels to me like bishop d1 is forced. Knight e6 is the only other move that you can reasonably consider, but after bishop takes b3, knight f8, king f8, I'll get the arrows right one day, I promise. I'm just up a piece. So that's not very good. So he essentially has to take, and then I take here, and really that's honestly that's helped me out. This exchanging operation has helped me out quite a bit, because with the less pieces on the board, it'll be very easy for my rook to find useful squares on the c-file somewhere, and leaving this minor piece of all minor pieces on the board for me is probably not the best. Very well placed knight. The pawn on e4 is weak. White's got problems. Yeah, takes. Knight d2 probably. Yeah, now rook c8 looks good. Threatening to win a piece, quite simply. Probably I should go rook c1 anyway. I need to get in somewhere. I need to budge that knight so rook b1 or something is possible. Yeah, that's fine. Maybe I should just go f5 and assemble the pawn duo here. Yeah, that looks reasonable. Let's do that. If I can force him to play g takes f5, and I get to play g takes f5. My pawns in the center will be pretty powerful. I can bring my king up to f6. Maybe I can play e4 myself. Like if he takes, I can play e4, and then I can put my king on e5. Start laying siege to this blockaded and weak d pawn. Man, Nimzo would be so proud of me this game. I blockaded, and now I'm about to destroy. In typical my system or chess praxis fashion. My chess hero Bent Larson would also be proud. Yeah. His play has a very my system-ish vibe to it. If you've never looked at his games, I highly recommend that you look at his games though. Best player in the West while Fischer was coming up at the ranks. Amazing fighting spirit. One of the best tournament players in history. Probably, I'm going to say only behind Karpov. Karpov was an amazing tournament player. Also quite a good match player, of course, but he's very well known for winning tons of tournaments as well. So any knight move from white is just going to allow rook b1 and rook takes b2, pretty much unstoppable. Knight c4 is impossible because it's protected. I need to mix up my arrow colors. Yeah, now we're cooking with gas. These are just completely arbitrary arrows. If white's king... Yeah, but doesn't this... Okay. Be sensible here. I could still play rook b1, though. Odds with check. Alright, we'll go king f6 first. See, I almost hastily blundered there. I'm strongly considering playing e4, and when he goes knight d4, playing f4, just getting in. It looks good. But I can also just go rook b1 here and win more material. Rook b1's a pretty massive threat, honestly. Is he going to go g5 check? Maybe he's going to go g5 check. Do I care about that? I kind of care about that. I can also just go f4. f4, g5, check, king f5 looks fine. e4, king g5 check, king g6, knight d4, f4 maybe. I'm just gonna go e4 and f4. I'm just wasting too much time. That has to be overwhelming. Spending too much time on a simple decision. I could play literally almost anything there. I mean, I think even I don't want to on positional grounds, but even f takes g4, f takes g4, rook b1 was likely very easily winning. I just pick up the pawn on b2 with check, and yeah. But I think getting both of my pawns here and allowing king e5 is just going to be completely fatal. Rook b1 can come in a second. If f4, knight f5, knight takes f5, g takes f5, king takes f5, d6. I guess even there I have just rook c8. So that should be all right. Tricky. Tricky, intelligent wisdom. It seems like one of those is redundant. I mean, I get that intelligence and wisdom are not the same, but they're pretty damn close. It's just an unusual name. This still seems pretty good. So I'm going to play it. So you're saying you want to go knight c6. Okay. King e5, knight c6, check, and I have to go king f5. You can, I mean, actually he can't even take on a7, but it's just, to me it's not even worth the hassle. I'm just going to put my king on a square where you can't check me and take on b2. After I take on b2, my rook can also just swoop over to h2 as well. This is sort of just a mop-up operation at this point. Man, hero of this game, nd6, or sd6, or cd6. What do the Russians use? What do the Russians call it? Well, it'd be a Cyrillic letter. I wouldn't know how to say anyway, most likely. I'm wondering if it's at some point just taking on b3 check or something is the most practical option. But I don't think we have to resort to that yet. White doesn't really have any threats. Everything's falling. Yeah, we can just take that. Conveniently protecting against his threat of knight f4 check. I mean, yeah, again, everything is essentially winning, I think. With 2-second ink, this shouldn't be that bad. Now that the bishop isn't on b3, though, it becomes enticing to put my king on e5 and attack this d5 pawn. So I'm going to do that. At some point, I can probably just check, or even not check, and just start making some magic with these guys. Yeah, this is fine. Let's harass this bishop. Probably going to play rook d2 check, kick his king out of this nice d4 square. Does this not trap it? What's he got? I don't think anything. Mobility. He's a little desperate. I guess I should probably just attack this knight, huh? Yeah, he can go back to e6. I'll let him take my pawn on f4. That's fine. I'm bagging a piece. Probably white should resign. Not gonna do it, he says. Wouldn't be prudent. Shout out to anyone who understood that really obscure Saturday Night Live reference. Let's just put the rook behind the pawn. And let's take the g5 pawn. I'll sack the rook for this pawn and just be up 2 pawns. That's a fine outcome. Especially because this one pawn is about to become a lady. Little insulting to play on, but, you know, to each their own. And I have a queen, it's not a rook, so I know how to mate. Get it? Let's just take his last pawn. He wants to take on a7, but now he sees a queen a5 check takes a4 is not what he wants. Okay, I'm going to play this anyway. Should we promote to knights? The perennial question for chess players everywhere. What do I even say at this point? That hasn't been said by chess players everywhere for the last 100 years. Well, okay, internet chess hasn't been around that long. You get the idea. All right, let's take a look. Hopefully this screen captures a little better. I changed it such that I have a little bit more room on the bottom so you can see the computer evals and time usage and all that stuff. So let's request a computer analysis real quick and take a look. So yeah, as I was saying in the opening to this game, it's always been very popular, especially at the club level, for people to play the exchange variation. White can even start this way to even reduce black's options further. I guess it's pretty much the same, but and the reason is that it's relatively linear, and you can sort of guarantee the types of positions that you're going to get and cut down on the theoretical preparation. I think you don't see Alekhine's defense that much, so it makes sense to play the exchange, I think, in a lot of ways. White really only needs to concern himself with a system against e takes d6 and a system against c takes d6, and instead, you could imagine in contrast, like let's say after d6, knight f3. This is perhaps the strongest move, theoretically, but black has a ton of variations that are possible, so... ooh, I played pretty well. So going back, after knight f3, yeah, there's just a ton of options here. So the traditional main line is bishop g4, and after bishop e2, black goes e6, and just finishes development very simply with bishop e7, castles, knight c6, etc. And I think this is historically been considered slightly better for white. So let's open up the opening explorer. We can see the main line. There are a lot of different ways actually to reach the main line, like c4 and castles usually transpose to each other, but castles, bishop e7, sometimes people flick in h3 first, it doesn't much matter. Again, h3 is possible here, but like knight c3, castles, e takes d6. Okay, there's also another line where white gets a massive space advantage after bishop e3, d5. I think c5, bishop takes f3. Yeah, and white has to make the choice whether or not to go bishop takes f3 and allow knight c4, or it's more common that white goes g takes f3, black goes knight c8, and white has a massive space advantage. I think this position is just clearly better for white, and I think actually there's some difference if white inserts h3 or not, because this square now is available for like rooks and queens and stuff, whereas if, let's say, white goes something like castles h3, bishop h5, bishop e3, d5, I think this is still a line, and after this takes, now knight c8. Somehow I feel like, and now maybe like f4, I can't remember which one is supposed to be better or worse. I don't think it matters that much, but I think some people think there's some significant nuances when the pawn is on h3 versus not on h3. And I think it has to do with the heavy piece not being able to come to h3. But so that's the traditional main line. As I was saying, though, some people have started to recommend like c4 and then takes on d6. I think Balagan recommended this, and Khalifman maybe, after something like this, and now d5 perhaps is or bishop e3, knight c6, d5. Yeah, this line. I think this was in Balagan's opening for white, according to Anand book a long time ago. Yeah, of course it's only d5 now, waiting for knight c6. That makes more sense. So that's the old main line. Black can also go c6 here instead. And after castles, I think the idea is to like take, and then e6 and go knight d7, and eventually just give up the bishop and try and play for a very solid structure here. After knight f3, there's also the Larsen variation, which is d takes e5, knight takes e5, which kind of looks weird at first because you're giving white essentially a tempo by exchanging this thing. White gets to place his knight on e5 for free, but black's idea is that eventually black is going to have a little bit less space. You can imagine that black's pawns are going to be sort of limited to e6 and c6, and white is probably eventually going to play c4 and have d4 and c4. And so black reasons that he wants to exchange pieces, and that knight d7 is going to effectively gain the tempo back at some point, because white is likely not going to allow this exchange. The new hotness in this variation is c6, which is called the Miles variation. Been played by people like Carlsen, Ivanchuk. All the top guys have played c6 at some point. Nakamura. And after bishop e2, bishop f5, the game ends up looking a lot like a Scandinavian defense. So black has traded his d pawn for white's e pawn and is going bishop f5 and is going to set up the typical sort of light squared blockade pawn structure. And after castles, knight d7 or e6 are, I think, fine here, and then white usually declines this trade with knight f3. And this is black's sort of mini plan, was to play d takes e5 and get rid of this cramping pawn. It does look like it donates white a tempo, but black gains it back after knight d7 and white retreating. And then after e6, c4, black can go to any of these squares. And yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to deny that after any of these moves that white should not be slightly better here. Just like in the Scandinavian, white's going to go knight c3, probably pick up this light squared bishop at some point with knight h4, and yeah, have a small space advantage, but black's pawn structure is very compact and solid. My preference here is to go g6, the Kangas, or the Kangas-Larsen. Normally bishop c4 is played, and after threatening queen f3, by the way, with a double attack here and here. And now black should meet the double attack by protecting the knight somehow. And yeah, solid. I have a game on my channel against a 2400, I forget his name, that was in the Kangas if you're interested in that. But I've gone on a long digression. My only point here is that there are a lot of options for black. And oh yeah, there's g6 right away, which I didn't mention before, which is very sharp. After bishop c4, knight b6, bishop b3, bishop g7, there are a couple of sharp options. The main move is knight g5, attacking f7, and after e6, queen f3, attacking f7 again. And black has three moves, queen e7, queen d7, and castles. I think actually this position is just not good for black. I don't think the best lines have really been thought out for white, but when I analyzed this maybe like a week ago, I thought it was extremely uncomfortable if white played precisely. It's also possible in this position for white to play the very interesting a4. Of course, a5 is the point, but the point really becomes clear after if black hops into the sort of chaos with d takes e5, knight d7, bishop takes f7. And after takes here, check. Note that king e8, knight e6 traps a queen, and king f8, knight e6 forks queen and king, so king g8 is forced. And now knight e6, queen e8, only move. Knight takes c7, forks these guys, and after queen d8, knight takes a8, e takes d4, we have a total mess. So black is down a rook for 2 pawns, or a rook for a pawn, something like that. But this knight is never making it out alive, and black will pick up this knight. And black's hoping after he picks up this knight, he'll have adequate compensation for the exchange in these center pawns. And I think actually black is doing okay here. The main line after c3 is knight c5, just protecting this pawn and perhaps getting ready to play, I don't know, just finishing your development, etc. But I actually think h6 here is very interesting, and after c takes d4, knight f6 is very solid for black. Black gives the pawn back, but his development is sort of a little bit easier in this variation than in the knight c5 variation. Just goes bishop f5, knight c6 or knight d7, king h7, maybe even queen d7 and rook takes a8 instead of sidelining the queen with queen takes a8. I think this is fun. So, but if you want to play g6, you have to solve this knight g5 issue, which I think might be unsolvable. So, by the way, knight g5, d5, f4 I think is very uncomfortable. So, anyway, a long digression on the classical Alekhine's theory. My point is that there are a lot of variations here for black, and white has to be prepared to play a lot of different sharp variations with different pawn structures. Similarly, the 4 pawns attack, there are a lot of variations that white has to know. There's bishop f5 right away, which is kind of tricky. The main line is d takes e5, f takes e5, knight c6, attacking d4, bishop e3. Knight f3 is inaccurate. It allows bishop g4, so white normally goes bishop e3 to protect the d-pawn first, not allowing this. Black goes bishop f5, knight c3, e6, knight f3, bishop e7. Bishop b4 is also possible, as is bishop g4 and queen d7. And after bishop e7, there are 2 main moves here. There's like the quiet bishop e2, and there's the very sharp d5, which like erupts into absolute chaos after these moves. So knight b4, getting the knight out of the way, threatening knight c2 check, attacking this pawn. Knight d4, meeting knight c2 check and hitting the bishop. Black moves the bishop, and now e6. And after f takes, d takes, bishop c6, queen g4, I believe is the move. Hitting g7 and getting ready to castle long, which would x-ray the queen. By the way, the problem is this allows bishop h4 check, g3, bishop takes h1, castles long, queen f6, g takes h4, castles. This position is like a sort of 4 pawns attack tabia, but it's extremely complicated. White has a bunch of moves here. There's bishop h3, there's bishop e2, there's bishop b5, there's bishop g5. Bishop g5 forces a queen sack with this. It's a complete mess. Black doesn't have to play this way, though. There's also f4, d takes e5, f takes e5, and now instead of knight c6 is the main line, there's c5, which allows d5. It looks crazy, right? But one idea is e6, knight c3, takes c4, getting ready to play bishop c5. I think this is actually near losing for black after d6, though. People weren't hip to this move for a long time, and this variation was very popular. It's also possible for black to play... No, not here. Yeah, here. To play, like, g6. No, not here. What the heck am I doing? g6 here. And after bishop f4, bishop g7, knight c3, castles, queen d2, e6... this is a mess. Black's hoping that these pawns end up being overextended. I think, let's see, it was castles long, takes, bishop g4, rook e1, and now I think c4 is the main move. h3, bishop f5, bishop g4, bishop d3, forced, takes, knight a6. This was given in... that new book by Sveshnikov 1 and Sveshnikov 2, or Sveshnikov 1 and Sveshnikov Jr., the Blitz and Rapid opening repertoire. Black has some compensation for the pawn here with like rook c8, knight b4, knight c4, but I think white's just better here. There have been a couple correspondence games that black won. There's g6 here as well, and after knight c3, bishop g7, bishop e3, black can castle, or black can play this really interesting Sergeyev variation with bishop e6, attacking this pawn right away. The point being that d5, something like bishop f5 or bishop c8, now that white has played d5, leaves the e5 pawn a little bit weaker. So like knight f3, bishop g4, and, you know, start attacking the e5 pawn. So, again, something of a massive digression, but the point is that if you want to play the 4 pawns, white also has to know a lot of really sharp theory and a lot of different pawn structures, and the exchange variation avoids that kind of thing. Whew. Okay, so now the exchange variation. H3 is not the most popular move. It's not a bad move, by the way. And perhaps if you want to play the H3 systems, it's a more precise way to reach the A3 systems. But the usual way to play is knight c3, g6, and for a long time, the Alekhine's exchange with c takes d6 for black was under this big cloud because of this Voronezh system. I think Voronezh is a city or a region, and I want to say Ukraine. Don't hold me to that, though. I'm a math and science guy. Geography is just I'm an absolute geographical abomination. But the main idea of this Voronezh variation is to clear out the long diagonal, protect the c4 square, and go d5 and cramp black. So it usually goes bishop e3, bishop e7, rook c1. And notice that this whole time, white is not going knight f3 and allowing bishop g4. So that's a critical part of this system. And now white goes the very important move b3. And now the c4 pawn is protected. The rook is off the long diagonal. And also, black is hard-pressed to play as I did in the game here with d5. And this is an important point because c5, knight c4 is no longer possible. And the other point behind the system becomes apparent if black tries like the very natural c6, knight c6. White can go d5, which now that the knight is protected and the rook is off the long diagonal, can only really be met by knight e5. And then white goes very strong move, bishop e2. And all of a sudden, this knight is sort of lacking squares, and all of black's pieces look insanely bad. So f4 is coming, and the knight doesn't have g4 because bishop e2 adds a second protector to the square. And if f4 has to be met by knight d7, black has these redundant knights. This knight is extremely paralyzed, doesn't have any real squares to go to, especially with this knight on d7. This bishop is locked in. White is scoring points hand over fist with this system, and like the main move here is like f5. So now f4 can be met by knight f7 or knight g4. But the problem is that something like this eventually is going to allow the knight to come to d4, and again, the knight on d4 is just a massive piece. Not only does black's pawn structure kind of suck, and he has like these awkward light squared weaknesses, this weird knight on b6, but the knight on d4 for white is going to be a monster. So you can see, if I go back to this position, that white is scoring very heavily in this main line. I mean, 65% winning plus 21% drawing is, 75%, 76%. So that's extremely high. So this is very uncomfortable. It's more popular for black to go e5 here, and after d takes e5, d takes e5, queen takes d8, rook takes d8, c5, knight d7. But here I think bishop c4 is the main move. Let's let the opening explorer catch up to confirm bishop c4. And yeah, I mean, black is supposed to be able to like hold this position after knight c6 and knight to a5, I believe. But I think it's just a little bit more comfortable for black or for white. This pawn majority on the queen side is pretty active, and white has very well placed pieces. Knight e4 to d6 is irritating. Even knight d5 is irritating. Black's queenside development is lagging a little bit. So even this is, I think, like John Watson analyzed this position for Chess Pub a lot, and Cyrus Lakdawala analyzed this in his book, The Alekhine's Offense Move by Move, and supposedly black can like hold this position, but it's pretty dreary. I think it's a little bit one-sided. The move I like to play in the Voronezh is bishop f5. And the point is relatively simple. Black makes a waiting move that really does not lose to d5 or does not kind of make d5 effective. So without this knight on c6, d5 makes a lot less sense. And black gets ready to play d5, meeting c5 with knight c8 now that the bishop is not on that square. So with the c8 square free, black can go knight c8. And eventually, after white plays knight e3, black's just going to lose a tempo and play bishop g4 anyway. So, for this to make some sense, you need to be familiar with the non-Voronezh systems in the Alekhine's exchange. So, for instance, if white just goes knight f3, black goes bishop g7, let's say, white goes bishop e2, black can go bishop g4, bishop e3, castles, let's say. And at some point, it becomes a threat for black to go bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, and knight takes c6. For instance, knight takes c4, rather. For instance, now. So here, bishop f3, knight c4 is not advisable because of bishop b7. But once black plays knight c6, bishop takes b7 is not possible. c4 is threatened. So white normally goes b3 here, you can see. And black goes d5. And again, c5, knight c8 is the idea, and black's going to fix this knight on c8 with e6 and knight to e7. And you can see black tends to score relatively well here, like rook c1. You can go bishop f3 right away, or e6. Sometimes you can provoke people to go h3 and waste a move when you want to play bishop f3 anyway. But for instance, just looking at like a typical position, this is something that black is aiming for. He's gotten rid of his light squared bishop. All his pawns are on light squares. Black has slightly less space, but all of his pieces occupy comfortable squares. Knight f5 is coming. Black's going to pressure the d-pawn. And this position, these types of positions tend to be okay for black. And so the idea with bishop f5 is to to essentially go into these types of positions down a tempo. So after like knight f3, d5, knight c5, knight c8, bishop e2, black can just play bishop g4 and lose a move and go into these positions anyway. Black tends to score well enough in the positions where he's not a tempo down that going into the tempo down version is still totally fine. So, at least in my opinion, that's what I intend when white goes into this Voronezh system is to go bishop f5 here. And people like, you can see Nakamura has played this more than once as black. Maxime Chadverik is doing this as black. I think Beburin, another Alekhine expert, has played this a couple times as black. I think it's okay. There are some secrets there that I think white hasn't discovered, but even there, I think black is surviving. So I think that's the most precise way to play against the exchange variation. I'm sorry if that was excruciatingly boring for some people, but those are my current thoughts on that line. But the line with h3 I think is okay, but perhaps not the most accurate for black. And usually the bishop is not on d3 in this system. I don't think it much matters. But again, we see this thematic break with d5, the sort of the key pawn break in the Alekhine's defense, and much more normal would be c5 here. And after c5, black's idea is to go knight c4. It looks sort of weird to take on this pawn on c4, but getting this pawn to c4 uncovers some attacks on the bishop, and also allows the queen to d5, and just allows a lot of light squared activity for black. You could imagine snaking around the bishop to d3, or now maybe e5 is good, meeting d5 with knight b4 when knight d3 is now possible, and d5 is under attack, etc. So black becomes very active after this move. Notice like something like queen a4 would just allow knight takes d4. So it's a little bit, I think, compliant for white to... Ooh, yeah, I should have thought of that. It's a little compliant for white to take on d5. Is this really any better, though? Like, well, bishop e2 and then bishop f5, I guess. Yeah, all right. I'd be happier having the bishop on e2 in the positions that I had instead of the bishop on c2. So maybe I should have gone knight b4. That makes some sense. Yeah, I like that move. I'll keep that in the mental Alekhine's bank. But knight takes d5 is totally fine. And after knight c3, there are a lot of possible moves here. Yeah, e5 is a move I think I mentioned as just being essentially completely equal. I mean, something like d takes e5. I can even flick this in. I just looked at this, and I thought that this had to be 100% equal. I mean, there's nothing wrong with black's position here. It's almost completely symmetrical. I'm going to develop the light square bishop, and I'll be completely fine. This isn't particularly exciting. But yeah, I guess if white wants to do this, he has to do it via this move order, because d takes e5, this would be very bad for white. So I think probably white's first inaccuracy in this game, I think, is probably not playing the Voronezh and playing this h3 line. And then I think probably not going c5 and trying to maybe attack my pawn with knight a3. Knight d2 hangs the d4 pawn. So knight a3 is the most accurate move. And probably I have to go queen d5 or bishop e6. So if bishop e6, f4, f5, f4, that's clever. So if bishop e6, rook c1, what am I doing here? It's a good question. Maybe b5? I thought here. Yeah, maybe that's a little loose. This, and it takes, I take here. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Another idea worth keeping in mind. But yeah, I think after this, black has essentially no problems. And there are a lot of ways for black to probably equalize here. I think even something like this is probably pretty comfortable. I thought about both of these captures. They both seemed a little bit premature, though. I think b6 is the most natural move if black wants to play for a little bit more. Like e5 here is just too clean, almost, against a lower-rated opponent. b6 leaves a little bit more tension in the position. And probably a3 is not necessary, I'm guessing. a3 is probably a little bit closer to a wasted move than a useful one. Knight b4 is not really all that dangerous for white. He can go either bishop e2 or bishop b1 and then gain the tempo back with a3 later, and that would be a better way to go probably than playing a3 right away. I think this is just a little bit of a wasted move. Okay, these moves are very natural. Yeah, and queen d2 is maybe a little bit too complacent. I think now this is just too strong probably. It's not easy to see a way out for white after this. And as I mentioned, this is sort of like a very weird reversed Tarrasch defense, with white having the isolated d pawn instead of black, and it's very thematic in the Tarrasch for this sort of sequence. So knight takes e3, grabbing the bishop, f takes, and then e5. It looks for a second that black is helping white's pawn structure. I'm giving him an extra central pawn. I'm shoring up this d4 weakness. I'm opening the f-file. But the key is that after this e5 counterstrike, white can't keep his center in this very nice organized fashion that he has it in. He can't keep all of the benefits that I just gave him. E takes d4 is, of course, threatened. And if d takes e5, his central pawn structure is totally ruined. He's just got this isolated e-pawn, and I have the two bishops in an open position. Both of my bishops are extremely strong. White would be very much worse here. So d5 is really the only move, but after knight a5, this pawn is hanging, knight c4 is looming, knight b3 is looming, even bishop h6, perhaps f5, e4. White has all of these problems, and he can't cope with it. So maybe, I don't want to take a huge amount of time on this, but I mean, like, I can just construct a fake example. It might not be like the most accurate or strongest example of this theme, but sometimes black sort of plays, how do I want to do this? Maybe like takes, and then b3 or something, and then here. And occasionally black will play some lame version of the Tarrasch like this, and like, let's say, I don't know, a6. I'm just wasting a move. And in these positions, occasionally knight takes e6, f takes e6, e4 is a strong way to play. And that's why I'm familiar with this sort of theme. So something like this, and you can see this looks extremely similar to the version I got in the game. Knight b6 is threatened, knight c5 is irritating. The d4 pawn's a little bit loose here, not as loose as it was in the game, and a lot of times this bishop, now that the pawn is on e4, is better placed on h3, where it sort of looks at this weak pawn and pins the queen. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's where I borrowed the idea from. Okay, yeah, and already here it's just hard to find something for white. Bishop c2 is the most natural move. Yeah, I mean, this is probably the biggest threat, so you have to either move this rook or you got to move the queen. Yeah. I mean, there are various ways to give up the exchange, but probably if you're going to give up the exchange, it's better to win this bishop than this knight. I'm guessing. Yeah, queen e2, but that just hangs a pawn, I think, right? There's not a lot going on here. White is just down a clean pawn. At least in this case, he gets to keep this light squared bishop, and I'm left with this crappy g7 bishop. Maybe that's the way. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, none of this is great. Bishop c2 is sort of the most ambitious, stopping the loss of the exchange and the loss of the pawn at the same time. The problem is, ooh, e4 here. Yeah, e4 here is something that I looked at. I just thought knight c4 was more obvious. The point is that after this, one of these captures is good and doesn't forfeit the bishop. And if bishop takes, then knight b3 is possible again. Interesting. But this just seemed obvious and strong to me, so... Yeah, and I think e4 is the best. So flicking in the check is better for some reason. Or at least the computer thinks it's better. Or I wonder if it's not even going to take the exchange. So this, here, here. Oh, okay, and it wants to take it anyway. So what's the difference? Nothing. Okay. Yeah, and I mean, the rest of the game isn't super exciting. White is just down an exchange, and black has a really solid position. I mean, I'm down an exchange with no real problems. So the only minor thing I have is I think I have to find some constructive ways to sort of finish my development. I'm a little bit cramped. Like, I need to get this rook into the game. I need to get this queen into the game. I need to fix this bishop. But knight d6 and doubling up rooks, as I said, and queen d7 or bishop a6, or it's just, yeah, it's a little bit too easy. White didn't create a lot of problems. Yeah, rook c5 was interesting. Yeah, b5 is probably good as well if I can get away with it. So if b5, knight b5, bishop a6 is the idea, but then a4. Ooh. Yeah, that's quite a bit better. Just x-raying the bishop, and white can't stop a5. Oh, it's check. Jeez. Okay. One move tactics, Tony. Idiot. Yeah, after all this, he goes back. Fine. Whatever. Yeah, queen c8 here was another move I thought about. I didn't want to allow this, though. I thought after this, maybe this was irritating, but yeah, it's actually just too much material. I'm up 2 exchanges if I do that. But king g7 is fine. And now, yeah, I think knight b5 is just poorly timed. And after this, yeah, I mean, knight c7 is not good. Probably white has to play this or this and just admit sort of that knight b5 was not timed well, because as it ends up, even though I missed this knight takes c7 e6 idea, taking off all of these pieces when you're down the exchange and are still down the exchange at the end is just a bad idea. This is just way too easy for black to finish off. I mean, none of these moves really are at all hard for me to play. It's just, you know, black's position is just way too easy to improve and play. There's no real practical problems here. And, yeah, I mean, just gaining more space, bringing your king into the center, attacking weaknesses, etc. It's not a position where the minor piece can really function versus the rook all that well. And white makes it a little worse here, even, I think. With rook b2, he self-traps the rook and can't hold it all together. And after this, yeah, it's just over. So tough game for white. I'm happy with how I played. I think it went pretty well. Another smooth victory for the Alekhine's defense. I've studied the exchange a lot because it's so common and popular at my level, and it's recommended in a lot of books. I think, well, maybe just that one. Now that I think about it, what books? There's the Chess Openings for White Explained book by Albert Perelstein and Zinjihashvili. It's recommended, and I'm actually struggling to think of another book that recommends it. I know Greet recommends knight f3 in his book For Every Man, and Khalifman recommends knight f3 as well. So maybe not, but I think people just play it because it's easy to play. So I've studied it a lot. I studied the exchange a lot. I refuse on general principles to play this move ever. It's just too symmetrical and lame. I think, if you're gonna play the Alekhine's defense, like, you have to dig down deep and, man up and hop into the Voronezh and take your extra center pawn like a boss. So, yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm thinking about releasing a lot of my Alekhine's defense analysis in a Chessable repertoire. I'm not finished with all of it yet. And a lot of it is extremely complicated. I'm not sure people would be all that excited to learn it. But like, for instance, I think in the main line, black should go down the main line 4 pawns. Black should go down this mess with this and allow this chaos, but just because all of his other ideas aren't very good. So I'm thinking about releasing that. I'm not sure if I want to, just because I don't think maybe people would be all that interested in it. But yeah, let me know if you would like that in the comments. Let me know what you think of the game. Also, let me know what your predictions are for the U.S. Championships. That's, I think, starting tomorrow. What day is today? The 13th? I think play starts on the 14th. I'm actually super pumped. There's a 2-day event after where Kasparov is playing Blitz against Caruana So and Nakamura, which is going to be awesome. I love watching Kasparov play, and I'm sort of eager to see how he does against these young, top guys. I'm sure he's an underdog, especially against Nakamura, who's an absolute savage in short time controls. So let me know what you think of Kasparov's chances, what you think of the idea, and let me know who you think the favorites are in the U.S. Championships. And also in Norway chess, which is coming up. There's a ton of awesome chess that's coming up. It's going to be really hard for me to pay attention at work. Okay. That's all for me today. I hope you guys liked it, and I will see you with more videos later. Bye.